This is a big swing for the Commanders. All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for November the 6th. The trade deadline has come and gone. So from here on out, your team is your team. And our first topic concerns a team that looks like is at the very top of the NFL right now and did something aggressive that it's been working on for a couple of weeks to address one of the few areas that it has where you look at it and say, yeah, that's a potential problem going forward. Now, coming into the season, the Lions felt really good about where they were at the edge rusher position, and they had every right to. The second overall pick in the 2022 draft, Aiden Hutchinson, was heading into his third year. They really felt like he was about to really hit his stride as an NFL player, and that played out before he was hurt against the Cowboys. And his injury against the Cowboys sent them into, basically search mode. Figure out what we have on the roster, then figure out what's out there for us in the market, and proceed. Now, the first piece of this, of course, is Hutchinson himself and the seriousness of this injury. And this is not a minor injury. I want to be clear about that. But as we've said here before, it definitely could have been worse. And while it was a freak thing and the broken leg is not what anyone would wish on anyone, the aftermath of it wound up being pretty fortuitous for both Hutchinson and the Lions. First of all, he was about 10 minutes away from a level 1 trauma center where one of the best surgeons in the world at this particular type of surgery was waiting for him, Dr. Alan Jones. As a result, he was on the operating table less than 3 hours after getting hurt at AT&T Stadium. And no nerve damage, no artery damage, no ligament damage. This is about as clean a break as you could possibly have. So obviously that's great news for Aiden Hutchinson, the person. What does it mean for him, the player? Well, it actually means that this isn't a pie in the sky thing, hoping that he'll play in the Super Bowl. He could get there. And so that's a piece of context that's important here, is that they feel like even if he can't make it back for the Super Bowl, this is not going to have any sort of long-term effect for him. He's going to have a full offseason in 2025. They intend to go in and try to get a contract extension done with him after the season when he'll first be eligible for one. This is a pretty big blip on the radar, but in the grand scheme of things, it could have been much worse. And they don't expect this to have any sort of long-term impact on him. So how does that affect them on the trade market? Well, if you're going to go and swing for a Max Crosby or a Myles Garrett, it certainly could color that. Because if this was something that you say, okay, like this could be an injury that takes a chunk out of 2 seasons, you'd be more likely to go and get a guy at the top of the market like that. In the circumstance that they're in right now, you maybe more look at it like this is a 1-year problem and can we find a 1-year solution, which is, why, even though I know that they had cursory discussions with the Browns about Myles Garrett, like some other teams did, this was really focused on Za'Darius Smith for the last couple of weeks. Now, the Browns really wanted to get a 4th-round pick out of this. I think the feeling was, even though he was up after the year, Smith is a good enough player where you look at him and say that's a premium spot. You should be able to get a pick in the top 125, 150 or so for a player like that. The Browns didn't wind up quite getting there, but they did get close. So they get a 5th-round pick, a 6th-round pick. Za'Darius Smith goes back to Detroit with a 7th-round pick. So essentially they get a 5, and then they improve a 7th to a 6th in 2026. And Za'Darius Smith now becomes the best pass rusher on the Lions team. Because they do have some depth up front. They can rotate, keep his legs fresh. He is on the back end of his career. And he is a guy who, was a good effective pass rusher for the Browns this year, So with a skill like that, you would think that would carry right over. So, I think, a Lions team that really didn't have any holes, this is one place where you would look and say, okay, like the loss of Hutchinson is a big one that could have an effect on them. They go and they shore that up in the short term. Maybe they have both of them in the Super Bowl if they get there. And this really doesn't affect, what they're looking for at their edge rusher position in 2025 and beyond. So I think Za'Darius Smith sort of became the perfect solution for the Lions as this whole thing played out. And, now, I think you look at the best team in the NFL, perhaps maybe getting better. And, just as far as what they gave up, those 4th and 5th round picks, first of all, The fifth round pick, they still have 6 months to replace it. And that sixth round pick, that sixth round pick that becomes a 7, they have a year and a half to replace that pick. And in that range of the draft, based on where they are from a roster standpoint, guys like that may not even make their team right now, which is part of, again, the context of the whole thing. So love what the Lions did. I think it was the sort of move that they needed to make just to give themselves a little bit extra in that area of pass rush. And they should be in a good spot now here going forward. As impressive as anybody's been. And the Chiefs, of course, are the Chiefs. Like, they've scratched and clawed and found a way to win. And, until someone knocks them off, they remain the kings of the NFL. But just, I don't, as far as the eye test goes, I don't know that anybody's passed it like the Lions have over the last month or so. Our second topic coming out of the trade deadline, the Commanders-Saints trade. This was an interesting one. The Commanders wind up giving up quite a bit, giving up third and fourth round picks to go and get Marshon Lattimore. There's a pick swap-ish type thing with a 5 and a 6 in there too. This is a big swing for the Commanders. This is a sign of where the Saints are at. And I think if you go back 6 or 7 weeks, you would have seen these teams in reverse roles, which is what's so interesting about it, to me at least. I look at it like the Commanders, they knew where they were at. And Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, from January through August, really looked at it like, this is going to take some time. We need to be patient in our rebuild. We don't need to take big swings yet. We're going to make smart, reasonable moves all the way through, which I think is how they've done it. On the flip side, you had a Saints team that had mortgaged so many contracts and was all in for right now. And had a coach that was on the hot seat. You had a general manager who has always been kind of a guy who wants to win here and now. Ownership that has invested a lot of cash and going cash over cap in so many different spots over the course of the last decade and a half. That was a team that you would say that's not the one that's going to offload a player. Yet here they are. The Saints fire Dennis Allen on Monday. They come back around. They trade Marshon Lattimore on Tuesday. And the Commanders show they're the team that's all in for right now. So how does it make sense for both of them? Well, on the Saints side, the way I view this, at some point they're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off. And I think this could be the beginning of it. And if you are going to rip the Band-Aid off, and they've been chasing this problem for a lot of years, a lot of people look at it and say, well, the cap's fake. Well, no, they just haven't been allotted a full salary cap for some time now, because those mortgage payments have come due every year. So they've had those on their ledger every year. And so if you do want to actually go through a full reset, you have to do things like this. You have to get rid of players who still have value to other teams, that are good players, that are making a lot of money. And so this could be the beginning of ripping the Band-Aid off and starting an actual rebuild. What that'll mean for the front office, we'll see. Darren Rizzi is very well respected, has a chance to win the job, but this certainly could be the beginning of something bigger for the Saints as they go forward. And amazing that we're here after they start 2-0. And they're the toast of the NFL. And Clint Kubiak looks like he's going to be a head coach. And they've lost 7 straight since, which is, again, why they are where they are. As for the Commanders, I don't think that this says like, oh yeah, we've just completely changed our approach. I think this is a way of creating a solution to what was an issue for them. And as much as everything's gone well for them over the course of the last 2 months, doesn't erase the fact that they have long-term questions at a lot of premium positions. Who's going to play receiver outside of Terry McLaurin's a question. Who's the long-term left tackle going to be? Could be Brandon Coleman. We'll see. Who they got on day 2 of the draft out of TCU, but I don't know that I'd feel like completely comfortable that he's the long-term solution there. So they should be in the tackle market this offseason, whether it's looking for a right tackle or a left tackle, a long-term one. The edge rusher issue, that's an issue that's still there. And that's the fallout of having traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young last year. And then a corner, swinging and missing on Emmanuel Forbes left them with a hole there. So you look at that: tackle, corner, receiver, edge rusher, with all those things being issues. How do you address them? Well, it's tough to address all of them in one offseason. And, for them to look at it and say, oh yeah, we'll get to all of that, in March and April of 2025, I think is unrealistic. So this gives them a creative way to start to fix one of those positions with a guy who's under contract through 2026. And yes, it looks like an all-in move, but that third round pick they got is a spare third round pick. It's the pick that it's their slotted third round pick. They still have the third round pick that they got in the Jahan Dotson deal. So they still have those resources in the first 2 days of the draft to work with. And Lattimore is still young enough at 28 years old where he could be a solution for you at that position for the next 3 or 4 years, and he could free you up to address tackle or edge rusher in the draft rather than having to look at it and say, well, we have to address all of these somehow. So how are we going to do it? So I think from that perspective, it was a smart move for the Commanders, in a way, like serving the here and the now, and then, also serving the future to some degree. That's why I think Lattimore provided, what was a unique opportunity there where this wasn't an aging player where you're just saying, yeah, here's our Band-Aid for now. Let's go win it. Yes, this helps us in the here and the now. This gives a jolt to our locker room, sends a good message to all those guys that we are in for them right now, but also serves the future. Finally, our third topic, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the aggressor at the trade deadline, believe it or not. They go and bring in Mike Williams. They go and get Preston Smith. They didn't have to give up much to do it, just a couple of day 3 picks to go and get those guys. I think it's interesting, on both counts. Again, those are both premium positions. Those are both guys who've played at a very high level. Both guys who I think undeniably are in the back nine, but guys who can help you again in the here and the now. It sends a message to your locker room for that we like where we're at right now. With our quarterback situation being a little more settled, Russell Wilson's in there right now. They have Justin Fields. If anything goes wrong there, the defense is playing at a very high level. This addresses a couple of needs. Number one, it's been no secret the receiver's been an issue for them. Really going back to the Deontay Johnson trade, in March, offloading him. Did you do enough to replace him? It's been a while since the Steelers have been in this sort of situation at receiver, and this addresses it. It doesn't address it like a Brandon Ayuk would have. They made calls on Devontae Adams as well. So this isn't that sort of swing, but it does give you an experienced player that takes the pressure off of George Pickens to some degree, and a guy who is going to be motivated. Look, I think part of this whole thing is Mike Williams wanting to get out of New York because there wasn't great opportunity there for him. And I think that's why, when the Jets were asked by the Raiders, could you throw Mike Williams in that deal? The Jets said no. I think at the time the Jets, wanted to fortify themselves at the position. And then you look at it, how many snaps are there to go around? Is Mike Williams happy here? It becomes a factor there. Well, now he goes to Pittsburgh. He's going to have an opportunity to play. And I think you're going to get a motivated Mike Williams as a result. Had a ton of injuries, of course, hasn't been able to stay healthy. But, I think if they can keep him on the field, he can be a real player for him like he was for the Chargers in Los Angeles. And then, Preston Smith, to me, like that, it makes a strong position stronger. Now, you already have TJ Watt and you have Alex Highsmith there, but their depth had been stretched a little bit by injuries. And, Preston Smith's a guy with some versatility, can play inside and out, that can give you something on passing downs. Even with Watt and Highsmith on the field, you can put all three of those guys on the field together and let them wreak havoc, make people pay for overplaying Watt a little bit. And then, if you do have more bad injury luck, it gives you a solid insurance policy. So both those things were logical moves by Omar Khan. And to me, to some degree, this is Omar Khan putting his stamp on the Steelers. We've seen a few of the moves that he's made, but this is a more aggressive move than maybe we would have seen in midseason from Kevin Colbert. So Omar Khan putting his stamp on the Steelers here and sending a good message to the locker room, like, hey, we believe this is a team that can compete, not just to get into the playoffs, but to make some noise when they get there. All right, that is the Breer Report for November 6th. Appreciate all you guys coming out. We'll be back tomorrow with our video mailbag, and then again, another edition of the Breer Report here on Friday morning.